Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and my apologies for me maybe being a minute late. I don't see members of the public present to dispense with the health and safety announcements. However, I would ask everybody please to make sure your mobile phones are turned off or to silent. Good evening to anybody who may be following us online. I'm Councillor Ian Edwards. I'm leader of the council and I am chairman of the cabinet. As I say, we've dispensed with the ordinary health and safety announcements. We'll move straight into the agenda item. Agenda item 1, please, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Palmer and Councillor Goddard and the Chief Executive also.
Thank you very much. Item 2, colleagues, are there any additional declarations of interest in matters before this meeting this evening? No. Thank you. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. There are pages 1 to 20 in your pack. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4 is to confirm that the meeting is in 2 parts. Part 1 is the public discussion on the substantive items. Part 2 are the private matters that tend to be contractual in nature. The decision, the actual issue is covered within a public preview report, which we will discuss later or mention later, and the decision is also published. However, the conversation, the discussion on the matter is kept confidential in the detail owing to its contractual nature. We're ready, then move into part 1 and item 5 is the annual educational standards. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Leader. So this evening I would like to propose agenda item 5, the annual education standards report for 2021-2022. This annual report focuses primarily on the attainment, progress and achievement and outcomes for the last academic year by providing data as to how our education system in the borough is performing. It is a significant report. However, once again, due to the pandemic last year's schools data is limited and therefore hard to make comparisons with previous years. It is intended that this will improve for the 2022-2023 report, as we will start to then get natural data coming back and reflective of what's actually going on within schools. Ofsted has resumed its inspections following COVID, and to date 21 schools in the borough have been inspected, and currently 91% of Hillingdon schools are graded good or better, and this is above the national average. 93% of our early years settings remain good or better, which is above the London average too. The focus from the team has been to support settings preparing for inspections and for those settings that have been graded less than good. And officers will continue to work with and in addition proactively encourage settings to sign up for the mentoring programs that are delivered through external providers which have been set up as part of the COVID recovery programme through the Department for Education. Attainment in early years has dropped below the national level for the first time in very many years within Hillingdon, and this has been investigated by officers, and you can find comment on this on page 44 of the report. Key Stage 2 results were positive and performed well against national averages. However, again, this would be caveated with the data from previous years not being complete, or actually no data from the previous 2 years. Also, I would point out that Key Stage 4 and 5, so that's the GCSE and A-level cohorts, last year after 2 years finally sat their public exams, and which is a move away from the previous years of centre-assessed and teacher-assessed grades. The DfE remarked, however, that the results may still be depressed due to the 2 previous pandemic years, whereby making assessments difficult to analyse and pupil attainment data was not comparable again from the previous years. Overall progress was made at Key Stage 4, which is the GCSE gradings. Key Stage 5 results, though, however, were lower than expected, with 15% of students attaining the required 3 or more A-level or equivalent of equivalent for going forwards towards higher education, and Hillingdon was statistically lower than its neighbours and the national average. The council officers will be prioritising support to raise the standards at Key Stage 5. We've already got a post-16 strategy that we have started to work through, which commenced last year, and this is to achieve the best possible outcomes at A-level and for the vocational qualifications. School place planning continues to be high on the Council's agenda, with primary enrolments a particular concern as they continue to decline in numbers, creating a reduction in PAN in many schools. That's the published admission numbers for the number of children that can apply and the places are available. But in autumn 2023, so this September, we'll see a reduction of 9 forms of entry across the primary sector, which equates to 270 school places. Nevertheless, the reduction will help with the volatility that some primary schools are experiencing, and in the long term, schools will be able to forward plan and consider their resources in a much better way. 100% of Hillingdon children were offered a primary school place in Borough, and 94% of children were offered their top 3 preferences, which is extremely positive. Hillingdon secondary school age children continues to be high. We had 3,659 applications. Once again, 100% of Hillingdon children were offered a school place. 89% received one of their top 3 preferences. So again, good figures. The sector has temporarily increased provision for the forthcoming year by just over 3 forms of entry due to a bulge in numbers of students within this next academic year. I'll touch briefly on SEND. Hillingdon has seen a growth of 100% since 2014, and last year the increase in educational healthcare plans rose by 14%. Hillingdon is addressing the in-borough special educational needs provision through the work it is carrying out through the Department for Education negotiated safety valve agreement, which was agreed last year, and working on the transformation of the service through early intervention pathways, as well as increasing the special educational need places capacity in special schools and also mainstream specialist resource provisions, and also it's developing a specialist early years assessment base. There was a large increase in borough and nationally for elective home education during the pandemic, which means children are not registered at schools. However, we are now beginning to see a decline within that. The numbers are still high, but families are now choosing to return back to the school settings, which is, for us, really important because we want to be able to have our children socialising and mixing and actually having a good education within schools. This report went to the Children's Family and Education Select Committee in March, and their comments can be found on page 22 of the report. This recommendation is for noting, and the recommendation is on page 21 of the Cabinet paper, and with that I therefore move.
Thank you very much for your very full introduction there. It is, from our perspective, a dated one when it comes to shaping policy. But it is a very useful record of fact and achievement. It paints a mixed picture. It was during an unusual time that should begin to more fully unwind, and we are expecting to see more favourable or better results coming forward in future annual reports. Colleagues, is this report noted? Thank you. Item 6, the Public Spaces Protection Order 2023 review. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Leader. Page 85 of the agenda pack. The Public Spaces Protection Order is due for its 3-year review, and this report is to begin that consultation process. The report has 3 recommendations on page 85 to approve the draft Public Spaces Protection Order, which is part of the pack, to note the consultation implementation timetable and have regard to the Equalities Impact Assessment. The consultation will run until mid-June. It will also give the Resident Services Select Committee an opportunity to comment on it. It is scheduled to return for final decision to the July Cabinet. The order contains many of the things that were in the 23-26 order, and these are listed on page 86. There are some new items which take account of things that have emerged in the last 3 years and for which we have appropriate evidence, including addressing smoking and vaping within children's play areas, dogs in children's play areas, and driving e-vehicles on motor vehicles over footways. There are also specific restrictions proposed for 3 town centres, being Uxbridge, Hayes and Ruislip, on the use of amplified equipment the placing of tables and stands and signage in the town centre, and financial agreements. And distribution of street trading without proper consent. For clarification, those 3 town centres weren't selected at random, but they are the ones where we have evidence to support restrictions and evidence that things have been occurring that we would wish to control. We don't have evidence that certainly has come forward at this stage for any other town centres. I therefore move the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lavery. Public spaces protection orders have become an essential part of the armoury of local authorities to be able to tackle antisocial behaviour and to support our residents. I do encourage all residents to be involved in this consultation and to have their say. Colleagues, are the 3 recommendations agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 7, the School Capital Programme update. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Leader. So this report once again provides an update on the changing needs for school places in Hillingdon, and more so the need for special educational need places, as well as the continuing investment in our schools conditions and buildings programme. The continued decline in primary school places since 2020 due to a lower birth rate has affected many primary schools, and I've just alluded to that in my previous my previous agenda item. And this year, the reduction in PAN for some primary schools opened up the opportunity to repurpose spaces in some of the schools to meet the change in demands. This year said there are 9 schools reducing PAN by 270 places. This will help the volatility of families changing schools during the school year to a preferred school that was previously not available to them, and will help plan, and not just us, but will help the schools plan for families moving into the borough to spaces that are readily available for them, and not having that, as I said, that volatility of movement where people are hopping around, families and children are hopping around from different schools. Data is telling us that the demand for mainstream secondary school places continues to rise, and thereby it will also, the anticipated flattening out of the dip starts after 2028, and all but 5 of our secondary schools this year have had their PAN full on National Offer Day, so we are running to very tight numbers, but still available to take on the additional young children and young people as and when. The Council continues with the 2 planned projects that are in the pipeline. Firstly, the complete rebuild and expansion of Harlington School, and the expansion is to include 1.5 forms of entry throughout the school as it runs in year on year, which is in the south of the borough, and with the reviewing the need of the sixth form of entry space at the proposed Bishop Arden School in the north of the borough. Both schools will have specialist resource provision for students with the ASD, which is the autism spectrum disorder, and with some integration into the mainstream environment, which for some young people and children actually allows them to have a more holistic view of working with and being with lots of other children, all of differing abilities. There continues to be a growing demand for in-borough special educational needs places, and tables 1 and 2 on page 114 of this report highlights the many projects that are currently going on in the background. Table 1 shows you the DFE projects that have been agreed and funded by the Department for Education, and we actually are now awaiting delivery. And Table 2 shows the Department for Education funded programmes that have been projects that have been agreed through the Dedicated Schools Grants Safety Valve Agreement, which is linked to bids for future SEN capital funding. And although there has been some delays to contracts due to, and we've been talking about this for a very long time, for months, to the material and labour costs, some of this work has now started to run through and is starting to be completed. So, for example, the Eden Trust, which has taken part on part of the Pinkwell School site, and also Orchard Hill, who has last year moved into the Old Brookfield Adult Education site. Other projects within this mix is that Ruislip Gardens, Charville and Wood End have started to progress their ASD, their Autistic Spectrum Disorder Special Resource Provisions, and during the Easter break they started, and we expect them to be completed and ready for the new academic year, starting immediately in September and then into October. Meadow High School has now moved into the next phase of works and has a works contractor that has now been appointed. This has taken some time, and this is for both of the sites, which is the main centre, which is in Colham, and the Harefield satellite site. And work is due to start in August 2023, and we really look forward to this programme starting. The Future Send programme is estimated to cover over £22 million of funding. In addition, and part of this is on paragraph 5, the Council will continue to invest in the mainstream schools and conditions building programme. Table 3 on page 117 lists the recently completed and current projects that are all in the pipeline, and this work is currently estimated to cost just under £22 million. All in all, Hillingdon continues to invest heavily in education and its education property portfolios. There are 3 other school projects that are being directly managed by the Department for Education, and a further 4 projects which are under the Free Schools programme. The recommendations is set out on page 111, and Cabinet is also once again asked to note this item this evening. I therefore move.
Thank you very much once again for a very full introduction to this item. It is pleasing to see that the continued investment in our school places is happening. It is good that the volatility in the building cost, material costs and labour costs are beginning to settle, and progress that had been stalled is now being made, and it is good that we will ultimately end up with local provision for our young people that need additional support. Colleague, is this report noted? Thank you. Apologies. Agenda item 8 is the Council Budget 2022-23 Revenue Month 11 report. In Councillor Goddard's absence, he has provided me with a report to be read into the record, which I will do here. And as I said, this is the report of the projected results for the full financial year to the 31st of March 2023, as they stood at the 28th of February 2023. The overall financial position of the Council continues to be stable, strong and encouragingly predictable. And indeed, we will continue to recognise the early benefits of our extensive transformation programme. The General Fund revenue account is predicted to be underspent of £109,000 against budget, a small positive variance of £14,000 against the previously reported month 10 position, but obviously still broadly consistent. Our general balances continue to be projected at a year-end position of £26.8 million. The continuing exceptional pressures arising from COVID-19 are projected at £14.9 million this year, which is lower than last year, but £3.6 million greater than budgeted. This position is materially consistent with month 10 reported position and is being absorbed within earmarked reserves. As colleagues are aware, central government support for COVID pressures ceased at the 31st of March 2022, and hence the full cost for the 2022-23 and later years is being absorbed by the Council. Inflation has had a highly material impact on our costs, and that a substantial element of this has also been absorbed within earmarked reserves. A number of our transformation and cost-saving measures started to kick in to beneficial effect. However, once again, I must emphasise that the need to retain and rebuild our reserves remains a priority now and in the years ahead. Our programme of savings for 2022-23 is progressing well, and as previously reported, we are on track for the entire programme of £13.3 million of savings to be delivered. The General Fund capital expenditure for the financial year is projected to be £25.6 million below the revised budget, very largely due to delays in the commencement of agreed projects. Substantial elements of this expenditure are expected to be rephased into later financial years. The dedicated school grant position has also suffered from cost inflation in respect of high needs placement to the tune of £2 million in excess of budget, this being largely attributable to the increasing cost of placements out of Borough. However, the projected year-end deficit is showing a further reduction to £19.7 million, which is £3.5 million lower than last year's closing position. The housing revenue account continues to report a close adherence to budget, with a forecast surplus against the budget of £91,000, being a £15,000 improvement on the month 10 position. The HRA capital expenditure for the year will be 9.7 below revised budget, and this, like the general fund, is largely due to project delays and is expected to be rephased into later years. I draw your attention, please, to the addendum provided, and this relates to a change in the uplift in service charges for district heating schemes and gas supplies, with effect from April 2023. The reason for this is that the past year, 2022 to 2023, the level set in anticipation of the utilities charges to the council were lower than the real cost of the energy faced by us. And the residents concerned, those receiving district heating schemes and gas supplies, effectively received a subsidy for the year, paid for, supported by the housing revenue account. That subsidy cannot be allowed to continue and has to be brought to an end. Therefore, there has to be an uplift in last year's fee to the level that was appropriate to last year, and on top of that, we now have to add the increase for this year, 23-24. At the time the budget was set, it was expected that the gas prices on the future year's contract would be much higher than has actually been delivered. The volatility in the energy prices has been to the benefit of us in this instance. And although the annual uplift is 68% for our energy cost, the residents are required to increase their charge by 123%, which includes the under charging of the past year. It has to be emphasised that the subsidy that was secured last year, paid for by the HRA, is not being sought for recovery. We must just not further subsidise from this point on. Consideration was given to phasing this recovery position over a further year or two, but that was discounted for two reasons. Firstly, that it would continue to draw on the reserves of the HRA, which will be to the detriment of other tenants and to our investment programme. And secondly, and possibly more importantly, is that this year we are certain that the Household Support Fund is available, which enables us to support households under exceptional pressures as a consequence of energy prices. We will be advising all of our tenants that are impacted by this change of the support available through that fund, which should enable those under greatest hardship to be supported financially. To some extent, this is a good news in that what was an exceptionally bad position of 213% is reduced to 123%, but it is still an exceptionally uncomfortable position to have to pass on. However, it is done so knowing that there is this financial support available through the Household Support Fund. That is an unfortunate addendum to have to bring. Well, it's a fortunate addendum, but it's unfortunate that it's 123%, and that is, as I say, unfortunate. Councillor Goddard goes on. He therefore moved recommendations 1 within Part A of the report set out on the in the pack, and Part B of the report, recommendations A to D plus A to C plus D as in the addendum. A particular note is recommendation B, which deals with the award of a single contract for building insurance for the councillor's leasehold residential properties in the sum of £919,000. Colleagues should be aware that the insurance underwriting market is challenging and that this year's an exceptional effort has been expended by officers in securing a satisfactory level of cover on terms which can be considered reasonable. The other recommendations are set out in this section are self-evidently explanatory, and I therefore move recommendations A to now D in Part 2. Colleagues, are all those recommendations agreed? Thank you very much. Turning now to item 9 is the preview report of matters to be considered in private. This is just for noting. It is provided for public interest. It provides greater detail than was previously available on those matters that are considered in Part 2. Is that report noted? Noted. Thank you very much. We now move to Part 2 of the meeting. I must ask that the link be closed.